Hey, what's up? Welcome to Train Your Dog podcast. This is Dexter. I'm your host. Right, today we are going to touch on training a puppy is all about making choices. What do we mean? What is choice? Right, choice is the act of choosing, the act of picking or deciding between two or more possibility. The opportunity or power to choose between two or more possibility, or the opportunity or power to make a decision, a range of things that can be chosen, right? Those that is making a decision. So making sound decision empower our dogs to make their own choices during the training process, right? And why do we want to create this opportunity for a dog to make choices? We human gets to make our choices in life. Why can't our dog do the same, right? So there's a question I think we need to answer to ourselves, right? So what is dog training? Dog training is not a rocket science. It's all about making choices, right? For example, in the daily routine, in terms of, during walks, rest time, off zone, playing, sleeping, and you just mind your own business, right? So these are all situation where if you train a dog to make their own decision, right, they will then make it as a default behavior that your dog can choose to use in a certain situation, right? So that is what we meant by making choices. So why do we? Because he knows that by choosing the right behavior, he is again rewarded heavily, right? So this is what we call, again, we come back to the reinforcement theory that we are in, right? A behavior that is motivated, a behavior that basically gets some fun, reward, and and some reaction. Basically, this is going to be repeated. The action will keep coming back. So if you want that behavior, keeps your reinforcement. So how about training? Like in the times of training, we also want our dog to make the right decision. Like for me as a dog trainer, I can tell you, sometimes I will have be training both dogs, right, at the same time. So what I will usually do, I will have a crate. I will teach my dog without closing the door. I will say that, okay, Millie, get into the crate, right? And Millie will go to the crate, and then I'll train Guineas, right? After I train for a few minutes, like 1 or 2 minutes with some engagement game, then I will swap my dog. So the dog understand that if he's to wait at the crate, he will be given his time, right? And that would be something that he likes, right? So what happens if he doesn't choose to stay in the crate, right? Then he will be basically will be reprimanded, right? In the sense that I will then bring him into the crate and I will lock out the dog, right? And that's to show the dog that if he doesn't make the right decision, then I will be there, to so-called help to restrain you, right? And if you choose it correctly, right, you get the freedom to, to rest in your crate without much disturbance, and if you are good, you may get to come out and play with the owner, in the earlier time, where you are unexpected, where you have fun. So this is where it comes into training, right? And the other one that is, I think, rather critical would be, for example, we are people who like guests, right? So we have relative, nephew, nieces that comes to our house, and we need to train our dog, right? And to teach the dog to understand what is the right behavior to choose, when my guest is pressing the doorbell. So the decision of getting into a rest place, right, where he can put his a position where he can rest, and then he can then get in the position and wait for you to allow the guest to come in and have a coffee, and then he will be heavily rewarded. And then what's up, right? What's the other things that he's going to enjoy? You're going to release him, and then he gets to meet his guests, right? And that will be the ultimate reinforcement that I believe our dogs will all want, right? So this is what we will be driving at when we're talking about when do we help our dogs to make decision. So after discussing for a while what is training a puppy, making decision, now it's time for us to look at, how do we get it done, right? We're telling you, we have been in the last segment, we have been saying when are you teaching your dog to make decision, right? And like what we mentioned during feeding, daily walks and things like that, right? So but we are going to look at what technique are we employing, right? So that our dog gets to understand by making a good decision, what is he going to get it, right? So our training concept, especially for us at PUPS dog training, we are using reward-based technique. So reward-based technique is it's not just about food. It's about getting the behavior done, what is being asked of you, and then you will be rewarded, right? So the training system that we are embarking on is like ABC, right? They are just in the same in the basic order, ABC, right? A is basically the antecedent. In short, we say it as ask, right? So B is the behavior from the dog, which is the behavior that offers by the dog, and then C becomes the consequences, right? So maybe I can put it this way, right? So if I ask the dog for a seat, for example, right? If the dogs give me a seat by replying a behavior for the actual seat, right? So when A is equals to B, the consequence is positive. So when it's positive, what do? I mark and click, or CT, right? Click and treat, right? So depending on how you're literally using it, right? So for us, in PUPS, we don't really use CT because some of us are not using clicker. For myself, I'm also not using clicker. I'm using my Berber as a marker. That's why you can hear me saying empty, right? So again, let's go back to the training system, right? If I ask for a down, right? So A antecedent as a cue, I ask the dog to perform a down, and the behavior comes out to be a wrong down, right? Something that is not the right B. And then what happens? The C becomes negative, right? So when negative, what it means, removal of food is punishment. So basically, I will tell the dog by telling him what we call a non-reward marker, by saying that that's a wrong behavior. This is to feedback to the dog, so the dog understand that he has done something wrong, and the result is you have missed this opportunity to get the reward from the owner. So in training, it really looks into a few things, right? We want you to basically look at the cue that's being given, offer that behavior, so that you get a reward marker, right? For example, like an MT or a CT, to tells you that you did the right job, and then that's where you get your reward, right? Or alternatively, right, we want you to understand that if a cue is being presented and we wanted you to do a behavior and you does not do it, is equals to it's an NRM, right? It becomes a non-reward marker, and you will end up with a punishment, right? So removal of food becomes punishment. We do not physically punish the dog, right? But I'm quite sure that by removing the food, once the dog feels that there is a refusal, right, it becomes negative, right? The dog perceives it as something not pleasant, so that is already a punishment, right? So to me, that indicates a punishment concept, right? So but we are not using the physical sense. So we basically, as a reward trainer, we work around the 4 quadrant. If you are familiar with, we are working with the positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, negative punishment. So we are working around the 4 quadrant, right? So we don't really ask you to work on a particular quadrant as much as you want, but we usually will utilize some of them, right? So I myself also does not use the entire quadrant, right? So what do we mean by how do we employ the method for dogs to understand how to make a right decision? So we use things like classical conditioning, right? Classical conditioning is something like a association, right? So if I tell my dog, for example, it called Dexter, and I respond, and you say, give me a reward marker by saying, okay, good, and then you pay me with $10. But do you think that I'm going to turn the next time you call Dexter? Of course, right? Because my name's Pay. So say it's the dog, right? So when you do an association, we are telling the dog that the name is equals to something pleasant, right? So if I call your name, you respond. If I say Max and you respond, or I call you Minnie, you respond, that is equals to a reward. So the dog associate the name with something pleasant. So that is what we call by classical conditioning, right? Then we goes into what we call operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning basically is in operation, right? So what you want the dog to do to really understand is that if I ask for something, if you execute it, right? When you execute it, right, it is something that you got to remember that is a particular behavior that I'm asking for you, so that you will be rewarded. A good example would be, for example, I use the cue, a sit cue, right? So I ask for a sit, the dog give me the behavior of sit, and the operant, the operation of the action, putting the butt on the ground, that is the behavior I want, the operant conditioning behavior that match with the a reward marker, and then you hear a reward coming. You hear the marker, and then the reward will comes, right? So we are also doing operant conditioning in training, right? And of course, you know that we are based on reward based, right? So reward based, I just want to to explain to you what really reward based is about. Reward based is not pure, what we call luring. It's about basically getting the dog to understand that a certain behavior, if it does it, you will get a reward, right? So it's something that the dog needs to work for it, right? In our term, we call it no free lunches, right? So as we all learn in system in life, nobody is going to give you a free lunch unless you are my friend, unless I'm your parents, you are my parents, you will feed me. And then other than that, right, who is going to give you a free lunch? Nobody is going to give you even a free ride, right? So in that sense, we all understand that reward based is a way to go. And I can tell you, frankly speaking, all reward based dog are basically thinking dog, right? So what do you do? What do you mean by thinking dog? Thinking dog are those dogs that keep thinking, right? What is the behavior? What is the last paid behavior that you are actually asking me to do? So in order for me to continue to enjoy that reward, I need to fall back to the same reaction. So if you're having a positive reinforced dog, you realize that your dog are so in love with exhibiting lots of behavior coming up for him. He will do again, all over again, the whole repertoire that you have teach him, so that he can execute that repertoire, and hopefully one of it fits what you ask for, and then so that he can hear a reward marker, and then a treats will be given to the dog, right? So this is what we want you to understand in terms of reward based training. In order to be a good reward based trainer, you need to teach yourself to have an eye for good. What I meant is that, right? Because we are all brought up in the system in Singapore, right? To catch, always look out for error, right? When somebody do something wrong, you will be there. We say, you're wrong. Or we take out the phone and then we video, and then we WhatsApp. We put it on the social media, to shame the person. So that is the very first thing we done, and we are all trained so well because we are brought up in a way where we know that we need to catch everybody when they are wrong. So by doing the right stuff, usually we doesn't even give the bother. A good example is that my own father, right? I remember, if I'm doing well, I will not have a pat on my back. It's seldom I'll get that. Because in Chinese, tradition, right? Doing well is what is expected, and if you are not doing well, it's something wrong, as a character, But again, we must understand, right? If we doesn't train ourselves to have an eye for good, how does your dog going to understand what is good is all about, right? So I give you an example, right? Instead, for example, right now I have a dog, is barking at someone at the door, and he goes out, he goes to the door, he barks and he jumps and he do whatsoever, right? So this is decision. Again, we comes to today's topic is podcast is talking about making a decision, right? So the dog has made a decision, goes to the door, he barks, he jumps, and I tell my guests don't come in yet, right? Because that's not the right time. And what most owner will do, I bet most owner will do, will be screaming at the door and say, "Hey, shut up," or something, right? Or or something that more negative. You take a roll up newspaper, you start chasing your dog and things like that. So these are all very negative, right? So what happened, right? Let's take a step back and understand thing, right? What happened if your dog is right now barking, right? And the moment he sits down, right, because he barks for a while and there is no feeding or reinforcement, right? So the behavior gets weaker, and what he does, he perform a alternate behavior in the sense, right? He goes for a sit, and then and then miraculously you're there to say, "Yes, good boy," and then he gets his cookie. I tell you, that will stick in his mind, right? Then he start thinking that, oh, why should I be so stupid, right? Wasting all my energy, jumping out and barking and screaming my heads off, at the door, and yet I cannot get to meet the person behind the door. If I choose to sit down, I get my reward, and that will be an easier thing and a quicker thing to do, right? So after a few repetitions, your dog will understand that, making a good decision is something good, right? But what it means to you is that you need to spend that time to train your eye, and catch the good stuff. Right, good example. Another good example is that when you're walking your dog, right? If your dog is walking beside you nicely, I bet you say nothing. Right, for me as a reinforcement trainer, I will always tell my dog, good boy, right? And then I continue to walk. If I have a cookie, I'll pay him because I want him to maintain walking nicely, not pulling me, not lunging at dogs, not, forging ahead and things like that, right? And that will build the reinforcement. And my dog eventually will start walking closer and closer to me because that is what I want. And by doing the right decision, he always will so-called corner me or to force me to then say yes, and I'll pay him, right? And so that he continue to maintain in the right zone, right? This is what I'm trying to talk about. So looking at the perspective, of having a good eye, I think is critical in puppy training, right? Let's learn not to be too quick to punish a dog. What you need to understand is that puppy being puppy, they are just puppy, right? And dogs is still a dog, right? You cannot humanize a dog. You cannot think that the dog thinks like you, because dogs doesn't think like human, right? What they want is to get all the advantage that they can get out of the human, right? In terms of attention, love, food, whatever he can get, right? He will get from you, right? As soon as he can find a way to get there. I give you a good example, right? Like if you have a kid, you realize that when you bring him to the toy shop, right? When you're at the toy shop, the dog learns, the kids learns that every time, if he refuse to leave the so-called the toy shop, he scream and he cry and he throw a ruckus, and then you know what you do? We will buy the toy for him, right? And that is a very bad reinforcement that we are feeding the boy, because the boy will know that every time what I need is just to be tough enough, to scream, to shout, so that my owner has no choice, my mommy, my daddy, by the end of the day have no choice to buy me that toy because I scream for it, right? So let's look at the other side of things that you do. A good example is that you bring the kid into the toy shop, and then he was searching for his toy, and then the first time we bring him out and he doesn't make any sense, it doesn't make any noise, and you bring him for something like a ice cream, right? So there's a reward for him to say that if you leave the toy shop without throwing a ruckus, something that you want, you still get what you want. Maybe it's not the toy, but something goodie, right? So it's ice cream that you're eating, right? Or the other hand, right? Imagine when you're there at the toy shop, right? The boy was not expecting anything, and then you buy for him something that he wants the previous time he visited the shop. I can tell you that sticks into the mind, right? I just want to explain to you because as a dog trainer, it's going to be very interesting, because I met up with my campmate, which is a preschool teacher. And then we were during one of the ICT, the army training that we went through. We spent 3 days on the ship, during our rest time, just talking about how reinforcement work for both kids and children, right? And if you look at all the concept behind the reinforcement, I can tell you we do the same thing, right? Just like the school teacher, we are doing the same thing. How we reward the kids, we are doing the same concept. How we reward the dog, and then it's something that I think it blows my mind, right? To see that reinforcement really is the way to get things done, right? So I just want you to learn that so that you can acquire that skill, and then your dog will be much happier, right? So I'll leave this with you, right? Again, training a puppy is all about making choices, right? So you need to help your dog to make choice, right? Your dog will not know which choice is good sometimes, right? If you leave it to him, for example, you leave it to him a food that's on the floor, and the dog food that's holding on your hand, of course he goes for the food on the floor, right? Because that is supposed to be tastier, right? But if you train your dog to choose the right behavior and gets fully reinforced for it, right, then he next time see a food that drops on the floor, he's not going to go for it, right? He will wait for you to feed him something better, right, over your bowl, right? So this is what I want to leave with you, right? So so that's all for today, right? I hope you enjoy the show, and thank you.